Hey Laura.
Hello. Sorry I'm late.
Hey,
No
Laura.
worries.
Laura, hey Raj.
So I was thinking maybe we can start today's weekly sync with you telling us about your experience with Drizzle, Laura. Even if it's little, no worries.
Sure. There's not a lot to say. As I said, I'm not an expert or anything, but I really like it because it's really lightweight and it has good type safety. And on top of that, the thing that's really nice about it is the whole reason that I started using it is I was learning SQL. And the thing that I really like about Drizzle is that the syntax of the ORM is basically mirroring the way that SQL works. So once you learn SQL, you basically already know how to write your queries.
Let me see if I can find an example. Here we are. So if you can see this, we have quite a few, like some examples here. Yeah, look at this. So this is for you, Shah. Look at this. We have, where is the users? Okay, look at these. So these are like, it's creating classes based on the database. And then db.insert users, values, new user, and then dot returning so that you can use await here. And you see, this is how it is working. And it's made for TypeScript, which makes it even better. So this is how, look at this, select dot from dot left join. Same thing as what you will do in SQL, except you are using methods here. So you don't have to do string handling.
Mm,
How
pretty
does this
cool.
make you feel?
It looks pretty cool. Looks like, it will save a lot of repetition, I guess.
Yeah, and it will also reduce vulnerabilities. Look at this part. So there they have created a separate EQ method to check for equality. What this will avoid you from doing is using the equal sign, because that's one of the most vulnerable things about SQL. So and it supports multiple databases, PostgreSQL, MySQL. Sorry about that. Yeah, and SQLite. I like this one a lot. This one named
Prisma,
Prisma.
I have seen a lot of on Twitter.
Yes, and I'll tell you why I like it. I like it a lot because, first of all, it's amazing, really amazing, and it also works outside JavaScript. I have used it before with Go as well, and I just want to show you what uh, databases it supports. Yeah, here you go. Just look at this. PostgreSQL, MySQL, SQLite, SQL, Microsoft SQL Server, MongoDB, CockroachDB. So you can use it with essentially any database, any of the popular databases. That is why I like Prisma a lot. It's very much like this only. But yeah, so these are ORMs, and I would very much encourage you to learn about them. Anyway, we have taken a good amount of time. So let's continue uh, with the demos. I think Raj is Raj is taking the demos for this week. Raj. Okay, sure. Meanwhile, I wanted to talk about pull request number 26 and give a shout out to Laura and Shagun for fixing the issue with navigation when there's no token that exists. So that was and they did what we discussed last time, branching out of a branch. um, am I sharing my screen? I should share my screen. Yep, here we are. So what this does is it hides those navigation links when there's no token, so that the user is forced to either join an existing list or create a new list, which is the right thing to do. So I really liked that. Good job, Laura. Yeah, we can. Yeah, she's a one person army, aren't you, Laura?
Well, I should probably work with other people more and not do so much on my own.
I don't know. I knew you would say something like this. Well, anyway, no worries. So looks like Raj is a little busy, so we can start with the demos so that we can continue with other things as well. We have number 24 by Shagun. Sorry, Shagun and Laura. Shagun and Laura. Yeah. Would you like to do the demo?
Sure, so I'm gonna do the code. Let me just. Right. Okay, so this is here. This is basically just the bit for the extra PR. Take in the token, you check if it exists. If it doesn't exist, then you navigate back to the home page instead of letting this be seen. And then down here, what I did is this, which is just if there's no token, it instead of rendering this content, it just renders an empty paragraph so that in that short period of time when this is visible before the redirect happens, no content is actually shown. Then for this week's issue, what we did is we used a regex here to check, basically to filter out anything that's not a letter or a number. And so we call this like normalizing the name, remove all the white space, all the special characters, all that kind of stuff. And then what we did down here is in the submit, I just pulled out here, this was initially, it was one error message for both the item name and the date that's purchased. So it just split it so that you can actually get a unique error message based on which thing is wrong. But then after that, what we did is if we check for the matching item, we use data.sum. You just check every data item, you normalize it, you normalize the form data, and you compare them to see if they're the same. If they are, it means that there's a matching item. So down here, if the matching item does exist, then it sends an error message that says that that item already exists. I believe that's everything. Yeah, I think that's it.
Okay. Nice work, Laura. Please keep your screen shared. Oh,
sorry.
no worries, no worries.
No, I'll just turn it back on. It's fine.
Yeah, I have a few comments to make. So the first thing is what Shah mentioned. It would be a really good idea to move the validation out of the submission, the handle submit method function, because it will make it more modular, and that's just good practice, and that's something that I have seen done mostly as well. So that would be something you can consider doing. Another thing I wanted to
sorry, I just wanted to ask about that. If you move, do you mean simply like move the logic out but still call it inside the submit function?
Exactly, yeah.
Oh, all right, okay, all right.
And another thing I wanted to add was maybe during the user interface discussion, you can consider adding some loading user interface into that empty paragraph, so that when the token is being fetched or when it's being checked, the user at least sees a loader.
The thing
And
is, I actually, sorry, I just want to make a comment on that. I actually tried to do that and it was loading so fast that you couldn't actually see the loader and it was just looking like another flash of content.
okay, I see. Well, no worries. In that case, yay to good internet speed. But we can do in the what do we call that? In the when we press F12, we yeah, the dev tools, there's an option to throttle and modify the internet speed. Maybe that's something you can use for testing, which is why I was also going to add that sometimes, checking if the token is null is not a necessary enough condition to know whether the loading is happening or not. Sometimes, there are other situations where the token might be null, in which case you would want to maintain another state to know if the loading is going on. Like you
Right,
want to show the user the loader, and if there's any error, the loader goes away and the user sees either the final result or unable to find token due to some error.
right.
So
I understand.
yeah, that's something you can do. And I definitely had one more thing to mention. Can you scroll up? Yes, about line number 21, the regular expression that you have used. So currently what this will do is it will filter out all the characters except Roman alphabets and numerals.
Yes, yes, I am aware of this. This is very Anglo-centric.
It is. And even even speaking of Anglo-centric, there are some things like hyphens and maybe dots that would also get replaced. So
Yeah,
this is something, I mean, let's keep it Anglo-centric for now. But in a future update, what I want you to do is, and it's possible in regular expressions, I want you to design it in a manner that it allows any language's words to remain, and
right.
only get rid of the white space. And maybe for the capitals, you already did G. No, you didn't. G is for global, right? There's supposed to be a, if you put an I before the G.
Yeah, you think you don't need the capitals
Yeah.
in the.
Exactly. And there's a, so this, I'll leave this for you to research. There is something in regular expressions that you can use in order to filter out non-word or non-alphabet characters for any language at all.
Right.
Yeah, that doesn't mean writing all of them in the square brackets. So,
do you just mean the \W?
well, there you have it. Yes, exactly. So
Yeah.
in this kind of situation, whenever, unless it's some sort of ID, if this is something the user inputs, and if it's not the name and it's required in Romans, if it's not a government application, if it's a task list, I would recommend keeping it more friendly for other languages as well.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, that's it for my comments. We can
There's
proceed to
just one other thing that I wanted to comment on, which is that this function, set submission status, it really needs to be replaced. It's really wonky. This like set timeout, if you're submitting really quickly multiple times, it's having all kinds of really weird behavior. I think eventually probably what we need to replace it with is something like toasts.
Okay, another comment on that. Yes, definitely we should do toasts. That's the best way to do this. About set timeout, whenever you create a timeout, this is some kind of general rule. Whenever you create a timeout, store it somewhere. And if the same set timeout may get called multiple times, if the same line of code that sets a timeout or interval gets called multiple times, you definitely need to clear the previous one. In which case, it's a good idea to, unless there are multiple toasts stacked under each other, in which case it's fine. So what you can do is you can clear the previous timeout when, so let's say you stored this timeout in a separate state. The next time, and then you modify this code to check, is there another timeout that's already stored in the state? If yes, I'll clear that timeout and then create a new timeout and then store it in the state.
Right, right.
So that's something you can
All
do, but don't do that. You better move to toasts in future. So that's good.
All right. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Shagun, you can go ahead and do the demo.
Right. Okay, for the demo, like for example, if I try to add an empty string, a message will be, wait, I guess there's some issue. 1 second.
Maybe while testing, you added an empty string. That's why that happened.
No, I removed it from the Firebase. 1 second.
Yep, there it is.
Yeah, I had to remove it.
The thing is, I
me a
just
second.
fixed that so that it would check for an empty string before it checks for duplicates.
Oh,
Do you, Shagun, did you pull the most recent commit?
yeah, you
Yeah,
made
I
some.
did it.
You made that change after I approved. Okay, that's why I didn't
Yeah,
notice.
yeah.
Okay, we can use the deployment link. Wait, I'll share it in the chat.
Okay, if I try to enter empty string, it's not working. I don't know.
Hmm.
Just a second. Okay, let me show for others. Like for example, already present item. It will show that it's already present. For the mixed cases, for example, uppercase and lowercase mix, it will show the same. And for example, spaces in between, the regex thing will remove the spaces, and it's same for the special characters. That the item Cheetos, like regex will remove all the special character along with the spaces, and it will show that the item is already present. And for the new item, yeah, you can see there is a delay that Laura mentioned. For that's because of the set time out for 3 seconds, I guess, and I'll fix that uh empty string thing.
No worries. I kind of saw that delay thing in the video that you put under the PR description as well. So that's something we should definitely consider looking at later. And here's what I propose for this PR. So the issue that we just saw, why don't you go ahead and fix it after this weekly sync, and then we will go ahead and merge the PR by the end of the day. And you can also consider doing the validation logic separation in a different function if you want. And the regular expression thing that I told Laura just now. Is that okay, Laura, Shagun?
Yep, that's fine.
Yeah. And Raj is back, so I'll hand it over to Raj.
Yeah. So one thing I suggest for validation or for the regex or for checking for duplication is using debounce. So I have it's like a npm package which allows you to check from the backend, or what it essentially does is it listens whenever you stop typing, and then it makes a request to the backend. So it's very helpful whenever you are trying to build this kind of feature, so that you don't have to write and then click on a button to check whether it's accepted or not. And you can also incorporate regex and all kind of validation in that. So the project I have linked here in FIOP, if you go to sign up for as a new user, whenever you are creating a username, you can check that feature out.
Yeah, that's true, Shah. Yeah, I remember. So I understood what Raj is trying to say. So if we are so in this list, we have the data in the front end, right? Almost all of it. But for other platforms, like when you are creating a new account and you have to select a username, it has to check in the backend to know if that username exists in the database, right? And in that case, what Raj told needs to be used.
Yeah. Uh, yeah.
Is there a library that you can share, Raj?
Yes, yes. Just it's called npm debounce. Here it is. To see the live feature, sign up for Infio.
Yeah, that's a really amazing project that Raj is working on. So definitely have a look at it. Okay, we can move to Shah and Tuba. Raj, would you like to proceed?
Like for the code review or for the demo part?
Yeah, for the demo.
Yeah, sure. Maybe Shah or Tuba want to present their work.
Yeah, Tuba can go ahead with the code review, and then I'll do the demonstration.
Okay, so here in dates.js, we have this function get days between dates, which finds out the difference between the dates passed in as parameters and then converts them to days. And this function is then exported. In firebase.js, inside the update item function, we have this calculate date next purchased function, which basically estimates the date next purchase using this calculate estimate function, which is imported from the Collab Lab shopping list utils. And then it returns this calculated date next purchased, which is then used to update the document here. So when we check an item, its date next purchased is updated. That's all for the code part.
Okay, good work, Tuba. So I looked at the PR and I even approved it. I just had one question, which I mentioned I will ask during the and Raj also has some feedback after me. So I had one question, which is the calculate date next purchase. So what I saw was um, initially the date next purchased for an item date next purchase property in Firebase is set to null. Is that right? Is that true that
Yes.
initially? Yeah. In that case,
Yeah.
what happens in line number 90? What do we get there in that case?
No, I think date next purchased is not null. Date last purchased is null. Date next purchase is set to whether the 7 days, 14 days, or 13 days after the date the item is created.
Okay, okay, got it.
Yeah.
So while
Date next
Shah,
purchase will never be done.
okay, okay, I agree. I understand. So while Shah does the project demo. Tuba, can you test it out on your side in the
Yes,
background?
sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tuba. Raj,
So let me
you
share.
also had Raj, you also had some feedback, right?
Uh, Let me check out the code you. Yeah, so I mentioned that it was great that they stored the time millisecond in as constant, and then they were using it everywhere instead of invoking it every time from the library. Yeah.
So he left some appreciating comments in the PR. You might consider looking at.
Yeah, I saw he left quite a few comments. So I'll go ahead with the demonstration.
Yes.
Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so here's our list for the my test list token, and there are two cases. There's a case in which an item has been added, but it has never been checked. And for this case, for example, we can consider T. So the T has never been purchased, so the date last purchase is null. When we press the check, we should see the date last purchase updating and the date next purchase also updating. Now, the other case is that we have already bought an item, so it will have a date last purchase value. So for example, okay, just a moment. That's fine. Okay, so this one has a date last purchase value. It's Cheetos. So if I click on Cheetos, it should update the date last purchase as well as the date next purchase. Okay. So these are values which were before we made the checks and normalization. So they are duplicate values, I guess. Let's see. Yeah, there are many Cheetos here. Let's just consider. Okay, let's try some value which is not duplicate. Particle accelerator. Okay, so particle accelerator. This is a date last purchase of May 4th. And if we click on the check, we see that the date last purchase updates and the date next purchase also updates. So these are the two conditions that are possible. So yeah, that's it.
Oh, looks great, Shah. Great work.
It got me confused. There were so many Cheetos.
Yeah. And there are, I think, at this point, we might have created so many lists. We really don't, we
Yeah,
really can't.
we added duplicate values just for testing and
Yeah.
random strings. So
Yes.
caught me by
Lots of them.
surprise.
Maybe once we finish everything, we'll clean the database and then start from
Yeah.
scratch and have everything in place when.
Yeah.
Okay, looks good to me, Shah. Let me see, is the PR ready for merging? Yeah, looks like everything is okay and the PR is ready for merging. Tuba, did you check what I mentioned previously?
Yes.
Okay, okay. And in fact, we just saw right now for T, the date next purchase was not null, right? All right, then we can merge the PR. Raj, would you like to do the honor?
Sure, why not?
Just merge number 25 for now. No, number 24 will merge after Laura and Shagun have made those updates.
Okay. Um,
Can you share your screen, Raj?
yeah, definitely. Why not? I think it's screen number 3.
Well, Raj has a multi-screen setup for those who didn't know.
So is it visible or something else is visible?
No, no, it is, it is.
So yeah, great work. We have our reviews. Um, March. And I think we should move on to assigning the issues for next week.
Yes, yes, we should. And this is, yeah, yes, we should. We should finish assigning before we begin the learning module because, you know, in case someone has to leave, at least we have an issue assigned and they can watch the rest in the recording.
Yes. Yeah. So we have 2 issues for the upcoming week. The first one is the issue number 11 allows you to delete the item from the list, and the issue number 12 predicts or just give you some information which of the item you are going to buy based based on your buying pattern. So yeah, these are the 2 issues, not like very complicated one, but just simple functions that one has to go through. So here's the issue number 11. You want to be able to delete items from the shopping list so that your list isn't cluttered with items that you don't want to buy in future. So should I go in little bit detail or just move on to the next issue? Like, I think our collabs are great at converting issues into doable tasks.
Yes, we are.
Yeah. And the issue number 12 is, yeah, it's just somehow, let the user know how likely you are to purchase a particular item in future. So yeah, so this issue has little bit more work. The issue number 12 and 11 is little bit easier, where you just have to implement the functionality of deleting an item from the list. So, and for week 6, for week 6, we have pair Laura and Shah, and the second pair is Tuba and Shagun. So, any kind of preference?
I actually haven't gotten a chance to work with Firebase yet, so I'd like to do 11 if possible.
You would like to do the
11th, I guess.
11.
Yeah,
sure.
it's fine with me.
Great. I think I can stop sharing my screen now.
Okay. After the call ends, we'll have the threads ready for you in Slack so that you can communicate regarding the issues. Today we have a new learning module, and I'm trying to have to use the feedback we got for our learning modules previously. So we will have a learning module on communication for developers. Now just give me a moment. I'll try to join this meeting using my browser because there's something I'm trying to do here. Just a second. Here I am. Okay, I'll try to share my screen. Let me know if you're able to see it. Are you able to see it?
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
Perfect. So we are going to talk about communication for developers today. And communication happens in a variety of forms. We are obviously not covering everything here. We are covering 3 of the most important ways in which developers communicate when they collaborate, when they work together. So communication is key. Everything happens through communication when you're working with developers in a team. And in the modern world where we are constantly hiring new engineers, and people are shifting from one department to another, or one company to another, it's important to develop standards for communication for communication, so that we have clarity on everything. Uh, and of course, other things like fraud prevention, uh, such as what Raj has mentioned in the chat. Okay, right. Moving forward, the first thing, so I mentioned we'll talk about 3 things in the learning module today. The first thing we'll talk about is documenting code. It's really important to document code, because there can be times when you look at the code that you have written and you yourself will not understand why you did what you did. So it's obviously twice as hard for other people to understand what you have written, which is why it is important to document. Here are some points. I'll go through all of them. So these are situations where we realize the importance of documenting the code. When we, it's said that 30 to 40% of code that we write is something that we have learned while writing the code. It's something that we did not know earlier. So what did you do? What did I do again? So in order to understand that, it's important for you to document the functionalities that you write for your code. If you have implemented a new feature and you have tested it out, it's very important that you also document how you tested it out, and how it can be accessed by the end user. Writing things down helps you learn. That's true, because if we have a comprehensive database of all the knowledge that we achieved throughout working on the project, it helps us to figure things out in an organized manner, and it speeds up development and also increases productivity. Documentation is, of course, a great tool for revisiting big decisions. So let's say we decided to shift from using MongoDB to PostgreSQL. That would involve lots of changes in the schema as well as the APIs. And it's very important that we document all of them when we do that. So useful for onboarding new team members. As I mentioned, knowledge transfer is a struggle. Most companies focus primarily on, whenever someone decides to leave the company gives them a notice period and tries hard to hire someone within that notice period so that they can get knowledge transfer done within the notice period from the employee that's leaving. And even if no one is leaving, it takes it's like a very vicious cycle to have people involved in doing knowledge transfer every single time, which is why it's important to have documentation. Yeah. It avoids institutional knowledge. Well, there are different departments in every organization, and not every department is supposed to be fluent with all kinds of knowledge. So it's important that we keep things organized so that we don't have to involve people unnecessarily to keep things in their mind so that they can propagate it to other team members. And finally, it empowers all team members. If we have good documentation of how the front end works and the back end works, for every backend question, the front end team will not have to talk to the backend people. They can just access the documentation. And here are some tips on how to write documentation. Write for the person who knows the least. Well, sometimes it's us, sometimes it's the stakeholders who don't know much about engineering practices, and sometimes it's new recruitments. Optimize for the person who needs a quick reference. Well, quick reference would probably be anyone from the engineering team. And we have a link here that is a good example of documentation, which you can look at later on. I'll share a link to the presentation with you. And I want to show you some things that I have found lately, and they're quite interesting. Wait, I'll share this with you. Okay, so this is a situation that we get into many times. The code does not work, and we attempt a couple of fixes after searching on Stack Overflow and looking on Google and finding something, and wow, finally it's working. We haven't maintained too many diffs in Git, so we don't know what change we actually did. And now, instead of wondering about why the code is not working, we are wondering why the code is working, so that we don't struggle the next time we go through the same error. Which is why it is important to document the first time you face this situation. If you don't do that, it's the same thing again. Why is it working and why is it not working? So that's something. And let's move back to the presentation and talk about the second thing that the second thing that that's very important for communication between developers, which are pull requests. Well, pull requests essentially are a fancy way of saying, please review my code before it gets merged. And these are usually done through graphical interfaces within platforms like GitHub, Bitbucket, GitLab, or self-hosted Git servers. Now, it's very important to document things well, and it's also important to develop a standard for doing them because of reasons that we'll talk about now. So, whenever someone is reviewing your pull request, they are obviously not going to read every single line of the code that you have written. You yourself are not going to read every single line of the code that you have written when you are reviewing your own PR to see if things have been done right, which is why it's important to properly document the changes within the pull request and to include demo videos if possible, or GIFs, so that people can look at them and see a preview of what is being done. Tools like what we are using for the Collab Lab repository, which auto deploys the updated code, are really good for collaboration, because if it's feasible for the application, it's good to have the new instance deployed so that people can test it out very easily. But when that's not the case, what people usually do is check out the branch locally and run the server on their machine to test things out. So point number 2, a big part of interviewing is talking or walking through the code. Having a robust PR description helps you remember what you did. So building this habit also builds a different box in our short-term and long-term memory that allows us to remember what we did in our pull request, and also make us more expressible in more expressible towards our changes in the pull request. And how do we do that? So here are some examples: screenshots, GIFs, and videos. We all like podcasts. Podcasts were great, but people eventually started making podcasts on YouTube with them just sitting in front of a mic and talking. How is it any different from podcasts? Well, people like to see each other while talking. It's good to show yourself while communicating, and visuals are always a great addition to audio, which is why people eventually realized it's more fun to see the interactions and see the faces of the people who are doing the podcast, and eventually they gained a lot of popularity on YouTube. The situation here is similar. When you add visuals to the pull request, it looks less boring, it looks more attractive, it looks more uh, easier on the eyes, especially of people who are sitting on an office chair and working for hours, as we do in our domain. So it's really a good practice to add screenshots, GIFs, and videos. Links to resources and links to code you reference. So whenever you reference certain parts of the code, it's a good practice to point out which part of the code you are referencing. So this deserves an example. Without that, it's incomplete. So I'll give you a very simple example. So let's say I am referencing a certain part of the code in this PR branch. So when I'm writing a review, then I can simply go here and select something like this and then write a comment here. But in the PR, when you're describing what you did, you should go to the branch, you should go to whichever file and whatever part of it that you're referencing. This is a good practice even for issues, not just for pull requests. And then you select different parts of the code like this. So in GitHub, you have to, if you're on Windows, you have to hold Shift to select a part of the code. What this does is, in the URL, if you look at the URL, it generates something like this at the end, which allows you to share the URL with anyone and they will be able to access that part of the code. In several instances, if you paste that URL in a pull request or an issue, GitHub also generates a preview for you, which makes it easier for people to see what code you are referring to. And that's a very good practice for pull requests. Self-review before asking others to review your code. So one of the many in-demand requested features in GitHub is being able to approve your own PR. Now, to the GitHub people, it does not make sense. Why do you need to approve your PR? The fact that you made a PR means that you have approved it, that you are okay with the changes that you have made. But self-review is so important and validation is so important that people have requested that feature. So how we currently do it is we keep the PR we mark the PR as not ready for review. We keep it as a draft PR and we only mark it as ready for review once the contributors working on that PR have verified the changes and have approved them. So definitely do self-review before asking others to review your code. I don't think that was done for one of the PRs today. Let me check. Exactly. So I think for Laura and Shagun's PR this time, it was still a draft when I reviewed it. So make sure that you do a self-review and a self-review before you mark it as ready for review. And then we can have the peer review and the mentor review. Keep the PRs small and narrowly scoped. Why? We'll talk about that. I remember I had something for that as well, but I can't find it anymore. Yeah, so keeping the PRs small and granular and atomic is just as important as keeping commits atomic, because if you include too many changes within a commit, it's hard to undo them. It's hard to review those changes. It's hard to look at the diff, and it's more error prone essentially. So, taking making increasing the number of steps you are going to take can reduce the error proneness of the application, which is good. A great PR description. This is a PR at one of the older projects, maybe the third batch of TCL. So you can consider having a look at it. I'll share a link to the presentation with you. All right, let me see if I have something to show you regarding this as well. Yeah. So, okay. So in organizations and also contests like these, these programs, fellowships, there is often some kind of competition as to how quickly you're able to do the thing, or if there is a deadline that you want to cater and you're considering finishing up things as soon as possible and getting it done before the deadline. Well, next time you decide on deadlines, keep this in your mind. 60% of the time is supposed to be spent in coding, and the remaining 40% is supposed to be spent in review, documentation, and other things, which is why it is just as important a part of the work to document the PR as it is to make the PR. So don't consider that as an additional step, because it is an inherent step in the process. And whenever you are in a situation like this, this also judge the urgency and importance of the situation, and if needed, have a conversation with your mentor or senior. All right, that was for pull requests. Moving forward, we'll talk about comments, which are a very controversial thing, because there's no single definite way of writing comments correctly. Some people don't write comments at all. They think that it's possible to have good code that does not require comments, and we'll talk about all of that right now. So when you add comments, it gives your team more context on what you are developing. So it's incomplete, the code is not done yet, and if anyone reviews it, it's a big update, it's a draft PR, they're trying to look at it, they're trying to make sense of it, but they're not understanding what has been done and what's supposed to be done. Or maybe you look at the code yourself later and you have no idea where you're supposed to continue. In that situation, it's important to write comments to define what you have done already and also what you have to do. To do is a keyword. That's to do and fix me are two popular keywords that are used for comments. And many code editors, even Visual Studio Code, have extensions that allow to highlight those in order to aid our developer experience. Even if you're working on a pull request and within that pull request you're going to make an update, you should still consider writing a comment and maybe erasing it in a further commit, so that you know what you are going to do. Instead of having to maintain notes in 10 different places, it's better to maintain the notes in the place where you are supposed to make the update, so that you know what you are supposed to do, or if anyone else takes up your task, they also know what's supposed to be done. And yes, self-documenting is a big reason why you should write comments, but you should not solely discard the idea of writing comments because you don't want to self-document. Sometimes such decisions are also standardized practices within the organization, and it's very important for projects that are going to be out for a very long time and that need to be maintained for a very long time, so that we have more clarity on how things are modularized and where what's being done. All right, what exactly are we supposed to write in the comment? Should we just write what we did? Is it like the English version of the code that we have written? Focus on why this code was written rather than what the code does. So if there's a print function, don't write a comment that says prints whatever is passed in it, because that's too obvious. Being too obvious in comments can often lead to more confusion than helping people who read the code, including you. So focus on why this code was written rather than what the code does. There are some good examples of code comments in a very in a library, in a UI library called Reach UI, and a link to that is added here. It's a TypeScript file. So I'll share the presentation anyway. You can consider looking at it then. All right, before moving forward, I want to show you some things. Yeah. So the kind of comments that I don't like and other developers also don't like, this. So this is a stop sign. It says stop, and still someone has added a note here saying this is a stop sign, which is over commenting, which is over explanation, which essentially disturbs the realm of good code, and that's something that we should avoid. The fact that the stop sign is designed well enough that it looks like a stop sign means you probably don't need to add a comment to explain that to others. What would help is, maybe having a braille bar here that improves accessibility for other people who are looking at the stop sign. So maybe if the stop sign is a backend update, you can add a comment that explains it to front end people instead of having it way too obvious for the backend people themselves. Here is another example of such a comment. So 90% of all code comments, when you force people to make comments, when you standardize comments in your organization, one of the mistakes people do initially is over comment. And here we have a cat that's labeled a cat. That's something that you don't want to do. Here we have Drake giving us an important coding lesson, telling us that instead of actually putting comments in the code, we can use variable names as comments. So it can have multiple meanings. It has a very hilarious meaning, which is, some people like to just store some text in a variable and use that as a comment. Don't do that. That's not a good thing. But, naming variables in a good way, maintaining the semantic correctness of the code that you write can often avoid the need of having comments. So if there's a function that does division, what you can do is name the parameters as dividend and divisor instead of naming them as x and y. And that gives all the clarity that's needed there, and you no longer need to write a comment to explain that to anyone. Make sure to name the function something related to divide so that the person reading the code knows that this is a function dedicated for division. And that should be self-sufficient. Making the code semantically good is self-sufficient in most cases, and you can choose not to write comments in those cases. Now here is a very popular comment, and as hilarious as it is, it's important that the person who wrote this comment wrote this. Let me read this out. Dear programmer, when I wrote this code, only God and I knew how it worked. Now only God knows this. Therefore, if you're trying to optimize this routine and it fails, most surely, please increase this counter as a warning for the next person. Total hours wasted here equal to 254. So, as hilarious as it is, it's important to understand that if too much time is being wasted on a certain part of the code, this person has put some effort into expressing that to the other developers so that they can understand that this is something they might end up wasting their time on, so that they avoid wasting too much time here, or they document all their observations correctly, or just follow the easier way out. So as we started off with the learning module, it's all about communication, and if communication requires writing a comment like this, then it's definitely worth it. Moving back to the presentation. that's it for the presentation. We can have a few lines of examples by each one of us before we finalize the presentation. So I want Laura, Shagun Shah, and Tuba to mention in the chat one of the experiences they had while working on the TCL project with comments, pull requests, and documentation. Meanwhile, I'll stop sharing and I'll also share the presentation with you. All right, I have shared the presentation with you in the Slack, and we can talk about the comments that we have. So Shah and Laura both agree on the point, and Shagun also, that the pull request template that we have in the Collab lab is really good. And it makes sure that we mention all the important points. Yeah. And in fact, I have seen that you all have been very comprehensive with the PR description within the using the PR template very resourcefully. So thanks a lot. I appreciate that a lot. And I'm telling this as a mentor, it really makes it very convenient for us to review the PR. And we are able to have very good discussion in the weekly sync because of that. Okay, I'm seeing everything about PR templates. What about, okay, we don't have any documentation for the application. Yeah, right. We have a feature called wikis in repositories that we can use for that purpose. But we are not talking about comments here. So does that mean we are not writing comments right now? Which is fine, as we discussed. Shagun mentioned that there are existing comments in the code to help develop the project, which is good. It's like a roadmap. I don't think anyone has written a comment, which is amazing. That means the code is written in a that would probably mean, because I don't think there's any part of the code that I fail to understand while reading the PR so far, which means the code is written in a manner such well that we don't need to document things in comments, which is great. We had a tiny documentation called orientation, which was helpful in setting up things. Yeah, yes, definitely. Thank you for pointing that out, Shah. All right. So do we have any questions or any experiences anyone would like to share related to the learning module today? If yes, feel free to turn your mic on and speak about it.
Just one thing that I wanted to say is something that I've been doing recently that I found really useful with my own projects, because I don't have PRs. I don't write a lot of comments. One thing that I've been doing is I've been actually keeping sort of like a daily log of what I did on the project each day, where I just write down, kind of an overview of the changes that I made, why I made them, the things that I learned, stuff like that. And it's been really useful for like going back and remembering, like, I had a project that I built that was pretty large and I didn't do that. And now I can't remember anything that I did. So I have found it really useful to have like a kind of a diary of the stuff that I did, because now I can go back and I can see, oh yeah, I did all that stuff.
Yeah. Yes, you're right, Laura. I have I have first-hand experience of doing that mistake, which is why I have been maintaining a journal since I don't know 5 6 years, and every day I write about what work I have done, and I read it the next day so that I can be sure about what I have done in the past. And maintaining project specific logs is also pretty good, maybe in the form of a Slack channel, or just a GitHub discussion, or maybe in a notes application that we're using. So that's a very, yeah, version control in a hardware format. Yeah. Definitely, except you can't undo. You'll just have to erase or buy a new journal. Yeah, not too many people use pencils these days. It takes discipline to write good comments. Sometimes I start a project with the mindset to write comments, but a couple of weeks later, I may not be writing as many comments. This can also mean that at that point in time, the ambiguity of the project compared to how it was initially has been gotten rid of, which is why now things are more obvious while reading the code. We have more clarity on what different parts of the code do, in which case it's okay if you are not writing as many comments eventually. All right, before more people leave, I think Shagun and Tuba have already left. I'll share the recording. I'll upload the recording and share it in the playlist. It will take a few hours for it to appear. And okay, I'll stop the recording before anything else.